Hello everyone. I think we had a great time in spring break. So this week's topic is about the accountability, the major main themes in PA area. So today I'm going to briefly explain chapter 8, accountability, in the textbook, and then Feng Yang's 2012 article regarding understanding accountability in public organization, actionable knowledge, and the structure agent's duality. So now we need to think about what is accountability. Again, this is the main concept in PA area. So each recent themes and recent famous management reforms or other policy or decision making in the public sector, regardless all level of the government in the United States, this accountability concept matters to everything. So accountability mechanisms tend to be dominated by formal mechanisms and structures, but of course, as well as the cultural and craft components, these things may interact with each other to confirm, the importance of the performance and then decision making. Those things are related to ensuring accountability in the public sector. So I want to explain some definition or framework now widely known in the PA literature. So, for example, the Gomley Jr., he said accountability means a procedural value that characterizes the process of governance, and along with other procedural values such as responsiveness and leadership and effectiveness and fairness, these things should be invoked only when it is possible to define them more precisely, to defend them more persuasively, and to place them in a context of other value, which means the accountability based on procedural aspects of public managers' decision making or policy or public organizations programs. So these concepts are intertwined with responsibility, of course, and responsiveness and leadership and effectiveness and fairness in some ways. And another famous scholar, Frederick C. Mosher, he said objective responsibility connotes the responsibility of a person or a public organization to someone else outside of self for something or some kind of performance. So it is closely akin to accountability or answerability. This is the important concept about answerability. So he distinguishes the objective responsibility with another concept, which is the subjective responsibility. So in other words, he said objective responsibility is related to the concept structural dimension of public management, whereas the subjective one is more related to the cultural dimension of public management. So once again, the concept of accountability has a long tradition in both political science and public management and administration field. So the accountability is really broadly embrace some concept about the obligation to act or produce according to the public interest or public expectation, or accountability is also important elements of a good governance. So it is related to the answerability, leadership, fairness, effectiveness, and other structural and cultural dimension of public management. So let's see another concept and a conceptual framework about the accountability. So Romzek and Domlik, they mentioned that the accountability refers to a relationship in which an individual or agency is held to answer, again, answerability, for performance that involves some delegation of authority to act. And another scholar said accountability may be related to the concept about the enforcement of responsibility. So in the context of this concept, they might be related to the legal authority or compliance with generally accepted moral obligations, as well as responsiveness to other people's value. So it seems more legal accountability concepts. And on the other hand, Ben's definition of accountability, he said there are three different types of targets of accountability. For finance, of course, public, how public funds can be distributed or organized, that might be related to the accountability to the citizens' needs, or the higher level of the authority in one organization, and or for fairness, they might be related to also accountability concept. Of course, I already mentioned that there are some relationship between accountability and performance in the organization, so we can say another target of accountability is for outcome, which means satisfactory or higher level of outcome of public organization. So these three concepts are main components of accountability according to the band. So among different type of accountability definition and conceptual framework indicated in the previous studies, I want to emphasize again Romjek and Domblick's their theoretical framework about accountability in the public sector. They mentioned that there are three different types of levels of organizational responsibility and relate to the as well as control. So first one is technical level. So in this level, organizations need to focus on the effective performance of specialized and detailed functions. The second level, which is managerial level, in this level, an organization need to provide for mediation among its technical components and between its technical functionaries and those customers and suppliers in the organization's task environments. The third level, which is institutional one, so in this level, the organization deals with the need for being part of the wider social system, which is the source of the meaning, legitimation, or higher level supports which makes implication of the organization's goals possible. So in other words, in terms of technical levels, organization needs some, specialization or expertise, but managerial level, the organization or public managers need some techniques and strategy in response to the changing environments. Then third one, institutional level. Of course, the public organization or public manager need to use some laws or rules related to the legitimations, which means more hierarchical level of the command and functions to subordinate or sub-level of organizations. So those level really related to the organization responsibility. And in terms of the accountability in the PA area, the public administration accountability involves the means by which public agencies and their workers, public managers, to manage the diverse expectations generated within and outside the organization. They might be managed, which is typo. And there are two factors about the accountability in PA, whether the ability to define and control expectations is held by some specialized entity inside or outside the agency, or which means the inside stakeholder or it's an outsider. And when you think about the contracting or privatization, there might be outside stakeholders and meet the third party or non-profit and for-profit sector. And second one, the degree of control that entity is given over defining those agencies' expectations. So that means the control also related to the concept of the accountability in PA area. Again, more specifically in terms of the accountability types in PA field, again, this concept is based on Romjek et Dubnik's article, and also it is mentioned in the textbook as well, the table 8.1. There are 4 different types of the accountability like this, depending on the degree of control over agency actions, as well as depending on the sources of agency control, here internal versus external. There are 4 different types of accountability: bureaucratic, sometimes it is mentioned that hierarchical, and there are legal accountability, and there are professional accountability and political accountability as well. So first of all, in terms of bureaucratic accountability, this is about the concept to be managed through focusing on the priorities of those at the top of the hierarchy. So those are include some concept about the supervisory subordinate control, which means this accountability pay attention to the supervision. And in terms of the legal accountability, this concept is based on the relationship between a controlling party outside the agency and members of the organization. So this accountability seems to be more fiduciary concepts. And third one is professional accountability. In this accountability, the public managers or organization tend to rely on skilled and expert employees to provide solutions. So these concepts more pay attention to the difference to expertise within the agency. The professionalism or training or expertise might be related to this accountability. And third and last one, the political accountability. This is about the concept of a relationship between representative and constituencies, our communities. So this concept related to the sub-concept, which is responsiveness to our community or citizens. So overall, there are 4 different types of accountability concept in PA area, which is widely known in the previous studies and scholars. And so this might be useful for you to remember these 4 different types of accountability. And more specifically, the accountability type, once again, these 4 accountability. Hierarchical accountability, again, this is based on efficiency value and obedience to organization directives is important. And legal accountability, this is based on the rule of law, and they empathize the compliance with external mandates. And third one, professional accountability, they are based on the expertise. So they empathize the differences to individual judgment and expertise. The first one is the political accountability. Their responsiveness might be related to this concept, so they seek for some responsiveness to key external stakeholders. So I would say this is the summarized concept of the previous, figures, tables. And also there are 4 different ways of managers' responsiveness related to accountability. Of course, these concept is based on the Romzek et al.'s article. They said there are 4 different types of managers in our society and our organization. Some managers might be passive. So in this case, they might be simply do not attempt to manage a completing expectation, or they are not doing subject to the whim of the political fortune. Oh, no, I'm sorry. They are more, likely to be subject to the whim of the political fortune because they are passive. And there are second type of managers. They are more reactive, which means they are more likely to deal with whatever consequences result from a particular actions. So in this concept, they tend to be more pay attention to the consequences. They value more performance and outcomes. And third manager type, they are more adaptive. So when they have face some environmental change and then pressure from external and internal environments, they tend to be more proactive to assess emerging situation, and they tend to more take in anticipatory steps to minimize costly consequences because they try to adopt their change. So they are more likely to pay attention to consequences as well as the particular situation. Their first type is strategic managers. They are more likely to be to active in managing the external task environments to help shape and direct even. They tend to be control over the situation. So in this case, they are more, focused on the consequences, performance, as well as situation and also environments. And next, turning to the historical perspective about accountability. In the textbook, the author mentioned that accountability is more deeply rooted in the U.S. constitutional principle. So the author mentioned that Alexander Hamilton. He emphasized before the dependent on the people in a Republican sense. So in the Federalist paper, there's this type of the relationship between legislature, legislative auditor, and executive branches. So here you can see there's some transparency concept is related to the process between these two stakeholders. So of course, in this case, the register needs to control over the executive actions and programs. So they have some accountability to monitor executives' actions and behaviors. Of course, the executive branch, they have the obligation to submit or show their progress in their work, right, program. So there's some auditing reporting responsibility about executive branches. And also there are third one, legislative auditor. They also have an obligation to audit the executive branches, and also between legislature and legislative auditor, there are also a certain type of accountability between each other. So this is just part of the historical perspective of accountability in the U.S. government and the legislature, and then other basic components of the political institutions. So this figure is very similar to the previous slides, but it's more specific one. I remember I put already before in the previous week, but I can't remember exactly. But anyway, this figure related to represent some relationship about the representative democracy accompanied with accountability. So when you look at this one, legislative body, they have obligations to monitor public managers and public agencies work on program and decision making. Of course, they're in terms of the performance, and also public managers and public agency, they need to be held accountable for their performance, because their main aim is to meet the citizens and public's interest and demands, right? Of course, there are some relationship between these two different bodies of the government. I already mentioned that, and then you can just imagine by yourself accountability, flows. And I want to introduce one example about the accountability failure case. This is not a case, and also I remember that in our textbook, chapter 1 and chapter 2 through 3, I guess, they have some related to the case. Apollo, maybe some accident case anyway. So in this case, the Roger Commission at the time was short-sighted, or in fact focusing exclusively on the failure of NASA's technological and managerial system. But the problem was not necessarily in the failure of those systems, not a technical problem, but rather in the inappropriateness of the political bureaucratic accountability mechanisms, which characterize NASA's management approach in recent years. So which means that at this case, more problematic was the political bureaucratic accountability. So agencies' emphasis on political and bureaucratic accountability was a relevant response to changing institutional expectations in NASA's environment, but they were improper at that time for technical tasks at hand. So which means that in this case there was a lack of the proper political and bureaucratic accountability, not technical one. And also, in the part of the textbook, they mentioned there's some relationship between accountability and the structural dimensions. So as you may know, of the three dimensions of public management the authors have emphasized in their textbook, the structural dimension encompasses the most familiar and widely used mechanisms for defining and influencing accountability relationship. So the primary and secondary checks and balances discussed in previous chapters, and also this concept, structural features and process embedded in the public management. There were we can recall the bounded rationality and principal agent theory and interest group mobilization or network theory, something like that. So to ensure accountability in the context of structural dimension, public managers need to shape the environments and conditions by themselves in which they work, often straining their activities and decisions. So there are some examples indicated in the textbook. So tools of the executive branch. Some agency have the whistleblower, systems. So there might be, one means and tools to ensure accountability within the organization. And in terms of tools of the legislative branch, there we can think about hearing to control over, the means management or corruption, potentially, potential kind of issues drawn from the public decision-making programs. And also we can think about investigative activities, implemented by legislative body and include referring and markup work of the various substantive area committees of the House and Senate that authorized and reauthorize the work of agencies and ongoing monitoring of the agencies. So those type of the hearings and monitoring activities can be helpful to control some mismanagement, but ensure accountability. And also in terms of tools of the judicial branches, there's a Chevron doctrine, which is widely known in the judicial area. And we can think about affirmative remedies, generally accepted approach. So which include process remedies and performance standards and specifies remedial actions. Those things can be also helpful to ensure accountability in the context of structural dimensions. And also, we need to think about two different types of the recent concepts. So in addition to the structural mechanism for ensuring public agency accountability through the executive, legislative, and judicial branches, mechanisms and monitors of government accountability are found in the private sector as well. So we can think about the citizen participation in the public process. Maybe we can recall the Blacksburg Manifesto, a document written in 1919. So those citizen involvement can be enabled through a number of legislative and quasi-judicial tools and processes at the international as well as U.S. federal, state, and local levels. So environments and involvement of empowerment of citizens in the process and decision-making of public organization can constitute another structural accountability mechanisms. So of course, we may imagine that we may observed or heard OMB Watch and Government Accountability Project or Public Citizens and Bank Information Center and Citizens Against Government Waste. There might be non-profit or for-profit organization or activities. Those can be helpful to ensure accountability. And also we can think about performance measurement of project system. So this is widely known concept in PA area. In scholars and practitioners side, so accountability compels some measure or appraisal of performance, particularly for those individuals and agencies with the authority to act on behalf of the public. So we can think about GPRA or PART, performance, rating tool, and reinventing government, Osborne and Gabler's, and also ABEST, which means the automated budget and evaluation system of Texas. So those type of performance measurement tool may be imposed by formal authority external to the organization, but the thing is they're very useful to ensure accountability in the public sector. And also we can think about that this way, between accountability and cultural dimensions. The author in the textbook, they mentioned that maybe, for example, ensuring accountability may be one goal of performance measurement in public organizations. So they mentioned that creating a performance culture may be one of the options to ensure accountability as well as improve performance. So a strong culture linked to accomplishing the organization's mission, professionalism, and motivation of individual actors based on their tasks, public services, and their missions. Those kind of concepts matter for organizational performance as well as to ensure helpful to ensure accountability. So there are one previous study written by Brewer Seldon in 2000. They used the data from the 1996 Merit Principles Survey. They found that there's empirical support for the previous model developed by the other scholars through significant association with cultural factors of efficacy, teamwork, and concern for the public interest, protection of employees and tasks, and public service motivation. So this type of concept, more cultural dimension concept, they are really matter to ensure accountability. So of course they emphasize professional norms and standards might be related to hiding accountability. So we can think about the organizational culture is more likely to contribute to ensuring responsible actions. So indeed, culture may be essential for ensuring accountability in a particular any general situations. And also we can think about again professionalism and standards and teamwork and some kind of subcultural concepts. They might be related to the accountability, involvedness and consistency and adaptability and other missions kind of things. And next, in terms of the between the accountability and the craft dimensions, we can think about in terms of the craft. They might be managerial leaders in strategy or their, tactics or decreation in some ways. So, of course, the author emphasized that this is important of the accountability, which is managerial leadership. So either explicit or implicit delegations of authority may require the practice of managerial craft. So public managers may be charged by formal authority with fulfilling specific accountability requirements that constitute a constraining structure under which they must operate. So in this case, managerial responsibility is related to this concept. So we can think about the judgment and decreation again, manager's autonomy and rationality and directive activity in practice, and there's some balanced view. So we can think about some example like JIPRA and Robert McNamara's. He's the previous Secretary of Defense. So he created the one important budgeting system, which is planning, programming, and budgeting system, PPBS, in the US history. And also we can think about some example like the other initiative at the state and city levels. So for example, you may know well the COMSTAT, which is developed by New York City Police Department. This is the one example representing the craft dimension accompanied with a higher level of accountability. So overall, the structural cultural aspects of accountability are often givens for public managers, shaping the environments in which they operate, the specific tasks they must fulfill, and the kinds of actions they must induce on the part of subordinates. But managers, through their practice or discretion or their own, judgments or craft, they need to exert influence over accountability relationships and responsible actions. So the former two dimension structural cultural aspects of accountability are a little bit different from the one of the craft dimension related to the accountability. So the craft dimension, this is about how managers, through exercising their discretion, may shape the response to external accountability requirements. So in this concept, managers need to choose generate accountability requirements themselves as a tools for managing and monitoring their subordinates within an organization. And next, I'm going to briefly explain the Professor Young's accountability article. So here, he mentioned the accountability research in PA, reviewing, many different type of empirical researches and normative researches already published in the main 5, PA journals, and as well as the very famous books. When he reviewed their concept and framework and definition representing the accountability, he makes some points. So in terms of the Bourbon's article, accountability means a social relationship in which an actor feels an obligation to explain and to justify his or her conduct to some significant others. So this concept is related to the answerability. I already mentioned it in the previous slide. And of course, there are some challenges between some, different concepts, which are includes the accountability to versus accountability for. In terms of the accountability to, we can think about the various sources, such as political and legal sources, but on the other hand, in terms of accountability for, we can think about various contents, such as finance and performance. So again, the author mentioned that there are differences between accountability to and accountability for, indicated in the previous studies. And also the Kai-Feng Yang also mentioned that the Rumsey and Dublin's article, there are 4 different types of accountability: legal, hierarchical, or bureaucratic, political, and professional accountability. I already mentioned the previous slides. And so managing expectations is basic fundamental aspects of accountability. So we need to more study, to explore such kind of concept in terms of accountability. And the author mentioned that there are 6 general conclusions indicated in the previous studies. The first one is there are conflicts among pressures of accountability, which leads to problems such as disaster, crisis, and mismanagement. The second one is over-reliance on a particular type of accountability leads to problems. They can lead to disaster or impede change. So, such as, for example, too much legal and hierarchical accountability can damage professional and political accountability in some ways. And also, the third one is there are no perfect accountability model, of course. And the fourth one, accountability based on the classic principal agent model or market approach, has serious limitations. So when you record the contracting and privatization, we can think about that in recent complex and changing times. We think about the different type of theories like resource-dependent theory, or population equals theory. I already mentioned that, or institutional theory, something like that, or collaboration kind of stuff. So that might be related to the fifth conclusion. So he said the contracting, privatization, and hybrid organization can lead to greater accountability challenges again and require particular capacities. Of course, government, contracting public agency, they need to be held accountable to their, capacity to control and manage the contractor's performance. And lastly, he mentioned that managerial reforms such as performance measurement have complications in traditional forms of accountability. So there might be, new forms of accountability need to be, applied to the performance measurement and other type of the recent reforms. According to him, there are many different, complex problems. So for this, many scholars started to pay attention to the actors' influence on accountability institutions. So again, new forms of accountability such as dialogue or deliberation and negotiation, or mutual accountability or emergency accountability, that might be, give some concept or, some strategy to deal with, performance measurement and other recent reforms effectively managed. And next, he makes some figure which is elaborated model linking formal accountability, felt accountability, and performance in public organizations. So also he suggests some future inquiry research topic in terms of nature and evolution of accountability like this. So as figure 1 indicated, a more complicated examination of accountability requires observation on and connection across different levels of analysis. The accountability arrangement at the government level, management practices at the organizational level, and attitudes and behavior at the individual level, those are things are, more interrelated each other. So formal accountability system, they might be related to the individual level. Of course, they might be, related to individual performance. And finally, they matter to higher level or satisfactory organization performance. So these are just basic, model he mentioned, and also their conclusion. So to, get more successful accountability in public administration area, we need to think about the more actionable accountability knowledge. So which means that the knowledge that is more likely to be helpful to human beings because it prescribes how they should act. So which means more, actionable knowledge might be related to, one concept of accountability. And also public managers need to judge an order of the accountability pressures they face in practice. And also they may be based on causal observation of the mechanism linking accountability structure and individual behavior and organizational outcomes. I already mentioned that in the previous slides about the figure 1, and also it must be based on process-based one in long term. And also the public managers and public organizations need to have more balanced and general view. So accountability need to be more instruments and virtue as well as both means and ends to get more higher level of performance. That's the basic conclusion of the Kai-Feng Yang mentioned in his article. And also discussion questions. So after reading the chapter 8 accountability textbook, explain how accountability mechanisms in the public sector work in the ignition of the 3 different types of the dimensions of public management, which are structure, culture, or craft components in practice. So I need you used some examples and empirical evidence indicated in the previous study, also it is indicated in the textbook chapter 8. So this is the due April 2nd. Thank you.